Good evening. As you know, my name is Carl Trammell. I felt it appropriate, since the holiday season is fast approaching, and with the upcoming performance I have with Adventure Theater, I felt I needed to do something to get a little bit more into the Christmas spirit this year. That being said, I decided to go back to one of my favorite traditions that I had growing up, and that would be, ever since I had first read the book, I had committed the entire story of how the Grinch stole Christmas entirely to memory. So every Christmas Eve, it was a tradition for me to stand in front of my family and do a dramatic recital of the book. I would only have to refer to it once every so often in case I forgot one or two words, but 95% of it came entirely from memory. So in honor of that time-honored tradition, I would like to share for you a dramatic recital of How the Grinch Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. Could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. Could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve hating the Whos, staring down at his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm, lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings. He snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here. Then he growled with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming. I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early, they'd rush for their toys, and then, oh, the noise. Oh, the noise. Oh, the noise, 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 noise. That's one thing he hated, was the noise, noise, noise. Then the Whos, young and old, would sit down to a feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, 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 feast. They'd feast on Who pudding, they'd feast on rare Who's roast beef, which is something the Grinch could not stand in the least. Then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together, with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Whos would start singing. And they'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing, 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 sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now. I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do. The Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made himself a Santa Claus hat and a coat. And he chuckled and clucked at his great Grinchy trick. With this coat and this hat, I'll look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around. But since reindeer are scarce, there were none to be found. Did that stop the Grinch? No. The Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max, and he took some black thread, and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty slacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, get up, and the sleigh started down toward the home where the Whos lay a-snoozing their town. All their windows were dark. Quiet snow filled the air. All the Whos were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square, this is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed, as he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney. Rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck. Only once for a minute or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue where the little Who stockings hung all in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present. Pop guns, bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn, and plums. Then the Grinch, he stuffed him in bags, and then the Grinch very nimbly, one by one, stuffed all the bags up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's Feast. He took the Who Pudding. He took the Roast Beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took their last can of Who Hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee, and now, grinned the Grinch, I will stuff up the tree. As the Grinch took the tree and he started to shove, he heard a small sound, like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou Who was no more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter who had got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why? But you know, that old Grinch was so smart and so slick, he thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. And he said, why, my sweet little tot, the fake Santa Claus lied. There's light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, and I'll bring it back here. And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who was in bed with her cup, he crept to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. And the last thing he took was the log for their fire. On their walls, he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 15:15 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze, when he packed up his sled. Packed it up with presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags, and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. 10,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-pooh to the Who's, he was grinchishly humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open for a minute or two, then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo. That's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put a hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. But the sound didn't sound sad. The sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry, very. So he looked down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes, and what he saw next was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or another, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. He puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. What happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed through the morning with his bright morning light. He brought back all the presents and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. Thank you very much for watching, and Merry Christmas, everybody.